The restaurant gleamed with that polished, almost too perfect sheen, dim lights casting soft halos over white tablecloths, the faint clink of wine glasses, and a murmur of couples pretending their lives were flawless. It was our 10th anniversary, and Lucy had picked the place. Some upscale spot just shy of extravagant, the kind where you're supposed to feel special, but end up noticing how stiff your collar feels. I adjusted mine, watching her across the table. She looked stunning, sharp cheekbones catching the candlelight, her dark hair swept back like she'd stepped out of a magazine. But there was something else tonight, a flicker in her eyes I couldn't place. "To us," she said, raising her glass with a smile that didn't quite reach her gaze. I mirrored her, the red wine bitter on my tongue. 10 years, a decade of building something, 2 boys, a house, a life. I thought we'd made it through the cracks. I was wrong. The conversation drifted. Small talk about Mark's soccer game, Steve's latest obsession with dinosaur fossils. Then it shifted. She twirled her glass, the liquid swirling like a storm brewing, and her lips twitched into a nervous little laugh. "John," she said, her voice dipping low, teasing, "what if we tried something different? Open things up a bit." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. The steak suddenly smelled like ash. "Open what up?" My tone came out flatter than I meant, but my pulse ticked up a notch. "Oh, she said, that laugh again, sharper now, like glass breaking in slow motion. "Free relationships. A little freedom. Doesn't that sound fun?" Her eyes locked on mine, daring me to react. "Fun?" My chest tightened. "No," I said, setting my fork down with a clink that fell too loud. "It doesn't. We're married, Lucy. We've got kids. That's not freedom. That's a wrecking ball." Her smile faltered, just for a heartbeat, before she stitched it back together. "Relax, John. It was just a question. God, you're so serious sometimes." She sipped her wine, but her hand trembled slightly, and her laugh came out forced, brittle. Forget I said anything. But I couldn't. The air between us thickened, heavy with something unspoken. She waved it off, chattering about dessert like nothing had happened, but her words felt like a mask slipping over a crack. I nodded along, forcing a smile, my mind spinning. Why ask that? Why now? The rational part of me, the IT guy who solves problems with logic, wanted to chalk it up to a bad joke. But the husband in me, the one who'd spent 10 years reading her silences, knew better. Something was off. We paid the bill in near silence. She leaned against me on the way to the car, her perfume sharp and familiar, but her touch felt performative, like she was playing a role. I drove home through the city's glow, the boys waiting with the sitter, the night stretching ahead like a tightrope. Lucy hummed softly, staring out the window, her fingers tapping the armrest. Tap, 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 like a countdown. Back home, she kissed me goodnight, quick, mechanical, and disappeared upstairs. I stood in the kitchen, the hum of the fridge filling the silence, replaying her words. A little freedom. My fists clenched. Freedom from what? From me? From us? I poured a glass of water, my reflection staring back from the dark window. "Steady, John. It's nothing." But as I climbed the stairs, her nervous laugh echoed in my skull, and a cold, gnawing dread settled in my gut. Something had shifted tonight, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know what. The days after the anniversary crawled by, each one laced with a quiet unease I couldn't shake. Lucy acted normal, too normal, maybe. She'd kiss me goodbye before heading to her marketing gig, her heels clicking out the door like nothing had changed. She'd laugh at Mark's goofy impressions over dinner, braid Steve's hair into a messy knot when he begged her to play dinosaurs. But it felt rehearsed, like she was reading lines from a script she'd memorized. I watched her closer than I wanted to admit, searching for the woman who dropped that grenade about freedom in the restaurant. Where was she hiding? It started with the phone. Thursday night, I was in the living room, debugging some code on my laptop, typical IT grind, while the boys wrestled upstairs, their shouts bouncing off the walls. Lucy was in the kitchen, supposedly prepping lunches for tomorrow. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Once, twice, then a third time, insistent like a wasp trapped in a jar. I glanced over. She didn't move, just kept slicing apples, her back to me, her shoulders stiff. You gonna get that? I called, keeping my voice light. She flinched, barely, but I caught it. Oh, it's probably just work, she said, too quick, wiping her hands on a towel. She grabbed the phone, silencing it without a glance, and shoved it into her pocket. Some client freaking out about a deadline. You know how it is. Yeah, I said, nodding, but my eyes lingered on her pocket. Work calls didn't come at 9 p.m. Not 3 in a row. Not without a flicker of annoyance on her face. She turned back to the apples, humming some tune I didn't recognize, but the air felt heavier now, like static before a storm. The next signal hit Friday morning. I was late for a meeting, scrambling for my keys, when I grabbed her coat off the hook by mistake. Same black wool, easy mix-up. Something crinkled in the pocket. I pulled it out, a crumpled receipt from a coffee shop downtown. $12.47. 2 lattes, a muffin. Dated last Tuesday, 2:17 p.m. My stomach twisted. She told me she was at a client pitch that afternoon, stuck in a boardroom till 6. No mention of coffee breaks. I stood there, staring at the ink-smudged paper, my mind racing. It's nothing, John. People grab coffee. But the receipt burned in my hand, a tiny splinter of doubt lodging deeper. I didn't say anything when she got home. Just watched her kick off her shoes, ramble about some campaign she was pitching, her voice bright and clipped. Too bright. I nodded, pouring myself a scotch, the ice clinking louder than her words. That night, I couldn't sleep. Her breathing was steady beside me, but I kept replaying it, the phone, the receipt, that nervous laugh in the restaurant. My rational side fought back. You're overthinking this. She stressed. It's fine. But then I smelled it. I rolled over, my face brushing her pillow. A faint whiff of something, woodsy, spicy, not hers. Not the floral perfume she'd worn for years. Men's cologne. My heart slammed against my ribs. I sat up, staring at her silhouette in the dark. She didn't stir. I slipped out of bed barefoot and padded to the bathroom. Her jacket hung on the door. I pressed it to my face, inhaling. There was again, stronger, unmistakable. Not mine. Not anything I'd ever worn. I stood there, the fabric bunched in my fists, my breath shallow. The house was silent except for the hum of the heater, but inside me, something roared. Who was it? When? How long? I wanted to storm back in, shake her awake, demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. I dropped the jacket, my hands shaking, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Pale, hollow-eyed, a man unraveling. The programmer in me needed data, proof. The husband in me just wanted the truth. Whatever it cost. I couldn't let it go. That cologne lingered in my nose like a ghost, mocking me every time I closed my eyes. By Saturday, I was a man possessed. Not the screaming, raging kind, but the quiet, methodical type who dismantles a problem line by line, like code gone haywire. Lucy didn't notice. Or maybe she did and didn't care. She breezed out the door that morning, claiming a work brunch with her team, her smile tight as she kissed the boys goodbye. Mark clung to her leg, whining about pancakes. Steve just waved, already lost in his dinosaur book. I watched her go, the engine of her sedan purring down the driveway, and felt the house settle into an eerie stillness. I started with her phone. She'd left it charging on the kitchen counter. An oversight, or maybe a taunt. My hands hovered over it, guilt prickling at me. 10 years of trust, and here I was about to cross a line. But that receipt, those calls, that damn smell, they weren't nothing. I typed her PIN, our anniversary date, 0928, and the screen unlocked. Notifications off. No call log from Thursday. Wiped clean. My throat tightened. Who erases their call history at 9 p.m. unless they've got something to hide? I scrolled to her texts. Work stuff, mostly terse exchanges with her boss, a thread about ad copy with some guy named Trevor. Then I saw it. Meet me at 3. Same place. No name, just a number sent last Tuesday. The coffee shop day. My pulse hammered. I grabbed my laptop, cross-referenced the number through a reverse lookup tool I'd built for a client once. It pinged back. Unregistered burner. Disposable. The kind you buy at a gas station when you don't want to be traced. I sat there, staring at the screen, the boys' laughter drifting from upstairs. A burner phone. My wife, Lucy, The woman who'd cried in my arms when Steve was born was texting someone from shadow number. I wanted to hurl the laptop across the room, but I didn't. I copied the number, snapped a photo of the text, and put her phone back exactly as it was. Evidence. I needed more. Next, her car. She'd taken the sedan, but her old SUV sat in the garage, gathering dust. I rummaged through it, my hands shaking as I popped the glove box. Lipstick, a gas receipt. Then, shoved under the passenger seat, a parking stub. Downtown garage, time-stamped last month, 11:47 p.m. My vision blurred. She told me she was at a late client dinner that night, home by 10. Another lie. I stuffed the stub in my pocket, my mind racing. Where was she? Who was she with? The real gut punch came later. I was in our bedroom, pretending to fold laundry while the boys napped when I opened her nightstand drawer. Tucked beneath a stack of paperbacks, those trashy thrillers she loved, was a photo. Not of us, not of the kids. A Polaroid of her, laughing, her arms around a man I didn't know. Dark hair, sharp jaw, smirking at the camera like he owned the world. On the back, scrawled in her handwriting, "To us, always." My knees buckled. I sank onto the bed, the photo trembling in my hands. 6 months, I'd later learn, but in that moment, it felt like a decade collapsing. I didn't hear her come home. The front door clicked, her voice calling out, "John? Boys." I shoved the photo back, slamming the drawer shut, my heart a jackhammer in my chest. "Up here," I croaked, forcing calm into my voice. She appeared in the doorway, all breezy smiles, a takeout bag in hand. "Brunch got canceled. Thought I'd grab us some Thai instead." "Great," I said, my lips numb. She didn't see the storm in me. Not yet. But as she chattered about pad Thai and traffic, I saw her for the first time, a stranger wearing my wife's face. And in that Polaroid burned into my brain, the first twice hit me like a freight train. She wasn't just cheating. She was building a whole other life. I couldn't look at her the same way. Sunday morning, Lucy stood at the stove, flipping pancakes for the boys, her hair pulled back in a loose bun, humming like she hadn't just torched our life. Mark giggled as she drizzled syrup into a smiley face on his plate. Steve begged for extra blueberries. I sat at the table, coffee mug cold in my hands, watching her play the perfect mom while that Polaroid seared a hole in my skull. To us, always. Who was he? How long had she been laughing behind my back? "John, you okay?" Her voice cut through my haze, sharp and probing. She tilted her head, spatula in hand, her eyes narrowing just enough to make me wonder if she knew I was onto her. "Yeah," I lied, forcing a smile that felt like a grimace. "Just tired. Late night debugging." She nodded, turning back to the stove, but I caught the flicker. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. She thought she had me fooled. Not anymore. I waited till she left for the grocery store, the boys glued to some cartoon in the living room. My chance. I tore through her closet, methodical but frantic, a man unspooling his own sanity. Nothing at first, dresses, scarves, her overpriced heels. Then, in a shoebox under a pile of sweaters, I hit gold. A second phone. Cheap, black, the kind you toss in a dumpster. I powered it on, no pin. Rookie mistake, Lucy. Or arrogance. The text gutted me. Hundreds of them, stretching back 6 months, all to one contact. See. No name, just initials. "Miss you already. Can't wait to see you." "He's clueless, don't worry." My hands shook as I scrolled. Each message a dagger, twisting deeper. Then the kicker, dated 2 weeks ago. "Once the papers are ready, we're gone." Kids too. I stared at the screen, ball rising in my throat. She wasn't just cheating. She was plotting to leave me and take Mark and Steve with her. I almost missed the photo folder. One image, blurry but clear enough. Her and him, the Polaroid guy, in some hotel room, her head on his chest, both of them grinning. My vision tunneled. I wanted to smash the phone, smash her, smash everything. But I didn't. I took screenshots, emailed them to myself from my work account. Untraceable, then wiped my prints and put it back. Evidence. I need it. That night, she came home late. "Traffic," she said, tossing her keys on the counter, her coat reeking of that cologne again. I nodded, playing along, but my mind was a war zone. Who was C? A coworker? A client? I dug in her laptop while she showered, cracking her password. Mark's birthday, predictable. Her work emails were clean, too clean, like she'd scrubbed them. But her browser history wasn't. Searches for divorce laws, custody battles, moving with kids out of state. My chest caved in. She wasn't just dreaming of freedom. She was planning her escape. Then the twist landed like a sucker punch. A deleted email, recovered from the trash. Caleb confirmed the lease. 2 bedrooms, space for the boys. We're set for March. Caleb, a name. And March, barely a month away. I leaned back, the chair creaking under me, my breath ragged. She'd rented a place. With him. For my kids. The woman I'd built a life with was dismantling it, piece by piece, while I slept beside her. I heard the shower stop, her footsteps padding closer. I closed the laptop, my face a mask as she walked in, towel around her hair, all innocent smiles. You're still up? Couldn't sleep, I said, my voice steady despite the rage clawing my insides. She didn't see the predator in me yet, the one who'd just found his prey. But she would. Soon. Monday morning broke gray and heavy, rain streaking the windows like tears I couldn't shed. Lucy was gone before dawn. Some early meeting, she'd mumbled, her voice clipped as she darted out. I didn't buy it anymore. The boys shuffled into the kitchen, Mark rubbing sleepy eyes, Steve clutching his dinosaur book. Where's Mom? Mark asked, his voice small. I forced a smile, ruffling his hair. Work, buddy. Pancakes. They nodded, oblivious to the war brewing inside me. I cooked in silence, the sizzle of batter drowning out the scream lodged in my throat. Her plan gnawed at me. Caleb, Elise, my kids in some stranger's apartment, calling him Dad while I faded into a weekend visitor. 6 months of lies, and now this. A calculated theft of everything I'd fought for. I couldn't let it happen. Not to Mark. Not to Steve. Not to me. The IT guy in me kicked into gear, logic over chaos. I dismantled her scheme the way I debugged a crashed server, step by step, no mercy. First, I called in sick. My boss didn't care. Remote work had its perks. Then I dug deeper. Her second phone was still in the shoebox. She hadn't moved it. Sloppy. I powered it on again, scrolling past the texts I'd already seen. A new one, sent last night. Lawyer says we're good. Just keep him in the dark till it's done. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth would crack. A lawyer. She wasn't just leaving. She was weaponizing the divorce, stacking the deck against me. I tracked the burner numbers activity through a script I'd written years ago for a security client. It pinged a tower downtown, near her office, then another near a residential area, probably Caleb's place. I mapped it, my hands steady despite the storm in my chest. Next, her bank account. We shared it, but she'd gotten careless. A $2,000 withdrawal last week, labeled consulting fee. Bull. I cross-checked it with her work calendar. No client meetings that day. It was a payoff, maybe to the lawyer, maybe to Caleb. Every click tightened the noose. The twist hit mid-afternoon. I hacked into her work email, easy, with her predictable passwords, and found a thread she hadn't deleted. Not with Caleb, but her boss, Trevor. Tell him the promotion's locked if he signs off on the move, it read. Dated 2 months ago. My blood ran cold. Trevor, the guy she'd name-dropped 100 times, was in on it. She wasn't just running off with Caleb. She'd leveraged her affair into a career boost, trading me and the boys for a corner office and a new life. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was a damn business deal. I leaned back, the room spinning. 10 years, and she'd sold us out like a stock option. Rage burned through me, hot and blinding, but I tamped it down. Not yet. I needed her to think she'd won. I spent the afternoon laying the trap. Copied every text, email, bank record onto a flash drive. Hired a PI through an encrypted site. Cash up front, no questions. He'd tail her, catch her with Caleb, get photos. Irrefutable proof for court. Then I called my own lawyer, a shark I'd met at a tech conference. Full custody, I told him, my voice steel. She's unfit. I've got evidence. That night, she came home late again, rain-soaked and smug. Rough day, she sighed, kicking off her boots. Client drama. I nodded, pouring her wine, my face a mask of calm. Sounds brutal, I said. handing her the glass. She didn't see the predator in my eyes, the one counting down her every lie. The boys ran to her, hugging her legs, and she smiled, that cold, practiced grin I'd once loved. I watched, my heart splintering, and promised myself she'd pay. Not with screams or fists, but with the truth. And I take back what was mine. The PI delivered Wednesday night. A manila envelope slid under my office door. Photos, timestamps, a report. I locked myself in, the house silent except for the boys' muffled snores upstairs. Lucy was out with colleagues, her latest excuse, and I'd told her to take her time. I needed her gone for this. The first photo hit like a punch. Her and Caleb, arm in arm, outside a sleek apartment building. Him, tall, dark-haired, that smug smirk from the Polaroid. Her, laughing, head tilted back, like she hadn't a care in the world. The next shot was worse. Them kissing in his car, her hand on his neck, intimate, shameless. Timestamp. Last Friday, 8:43 p.m. She told me she was at a networking event. I flipped through the rest. Coffee dates, late-night walks, him dropping her off 2 blocks from home. The report confirmed the lease. 2 bedrooms, signed by Caleb Morrison, effective March 1st. My lawyer had the bank records, the text, Trevor's email. The noose was tight. I'd waited a week, played the clueless husband, let her think she'd outsmarted me. Tonight, that ended. She got home at 11, her coat damp, that cologne wafting off her like a confession. "Hey," she said, casual, kicking off her shoes. "Boys asleep?" "Yeah," I said, leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. My voice was steady, but my pulse thundered. "Good night out." She shrugged, pouring herself water. Same old. Drinks, small talk. Exhausting. Her eyes flicked to me, testing, and I saw it, the tiniest crack in her mask. She knew something was off. "Sit down, Lucy." My tone wasn't a request. She froze, glass halfway to her lips, then set it down slow, her smile fading. "What's this about?" I slid the envelope across the table. "Open it." Her fingers hesitated, then tore it open. Photos spilled out, her laughter frozen on glossy paper. Her face drained of color, but she didn't flinch long. She shoved them back, scoffing. "What is this, John? You're spying on me now." 6 months, I said, stepping closer, my voice low and venomous. "Caleb Morrison, a lease, a lawyer. You're not just screwing him, you're stealing my kids." I tossed the flash drive onto the table, its clatter like a gunshot. Texts, emails, bank withdrawals. "You're done," she snapped, lunging to her feet, her eyes blazing. "You sanctimonious jerk. You think you're so perfect, sitting there judging me? I've been suffocating in this marriage for years." Her voice cracked, but it wasn't remorse, it was venom. "Caleb gets me. He's not some robot who'd rather code than live." Suffocating, I roared, slamming my fist on the counter. "You've got 2 boys who worship you, a life I bled for, and you traded for some sleaze and a promotion? Trevor's in on it too, right? Your little deal." Her mouth twitched. A tell. She lunged for the drive, but I snatched it first, holding it out of reach. "Don't," I growled. "I've got copies. You're not wiggling out of this." Then the twist. She laughed, cold and jagged, stepping back. "You think you've won? I've already filed, John. Last week. You're too late. Caleb's lawyer's better than yours, and the boys? They'll love him. You're just a boring dad who'll fade away." My world tilted. Filed? Last week. I'd missed it, buried in my own trap. I hadn't checked the courts. Rage blinded me, but I held it together, barely. "We'll see," I said, my voice ice. "I've got proof you're unfit. Adultery, conspiracy, neglect. You're not taking them." She smirked, grabbing her coat. "Try it. You'll lose." She stormed out, the door slamming, leaving me in the wreckage. I sank to the floor, photos scattered around me, her laugh echoing in my skull. She played me, again. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, the papers arrived. A courier knocked at 7 a.m., just as I was pouring cereal for the boys. Mark and Steve were still in pajamas, arguing over who'd get the last of the Cocoa Puffs. I signed for the envelope, my hands numb, and ripped it open on the porch. Divorce petition. Lucy and Davis versus John Michael Davis. Filed 8 days ago. She wanted full custody, claiming I was emotionally distant and unstable. Me, unstable. The woman who'd been plotting her exit with a lover was painting me as the villain. My knees shook, but I shoved the papers in my briefcase before the boys could see. She didn't come home that night. Texted me instead, staying with a friend. Tell the boys I'll call. Friend, right? Caleb's apartment, more like. I read them a story. Mark curled against me. Steve clutching his dinosaur, trying to keep my voice steady. Why's Mom gone again? Steve asked, his eyes big and searching. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Work stuff, bud. She'll be back soon. A lie, but what else could I say? They didn't need to know their mother was tearing us apart. My lawyer, Greg, met me that afternoon. Sharp suit, sharper eyes. She's got a head start, he said, scanning her filing. Her attorney's a pit bull, specializes in custody grabs. But your evidence is solid. Adultery's not enough alone, though. We need to prove she's a risk to the kids. I handed him the PI's photos, the texts, the lease details. She's moving them out of state with some creep, I said, my voice raw. That's a risk. Greg nodded, scribbling notes. It's a start. We'll counterfile tomorrow. Full custody, supervised visits for her. The first hearing came fast. Friday, a sterile courtroom smelling of wax and despair. Lucy sat across from me, polished and poised, Caleb nowhere in sight. Her lawyer, a slick guy with a $500 haircut, spun a tale. I was a workaholic, neglectful, prone to outbursts. Lies, every word, but she'd coach him well. My outburst, yelling in the kitchen, was her trump card. Mr. Davis has anger issues, she said, her voice soft, rehearsed. I feared for my safety. I clenched my fists under the table, Greg's hand on my arm, keeping me grounded. I testified next, laying out her affair, her plans with Caleb, the lease. Greg submitted the flash drive, the photos, her texts about taking the boys. The judge, a tired woman with gray streaks, frowned, flipping through it all. Lucy's lawyer countered, consenting adults, Your Honor. No proof of harm to the children. My stomach sank. He was right. Legally, her cheating didn't make her unfit. Not yet. Then the twist dropped like a bomb. Her lawyer slid a document across the bench. A psych evaluation, dated last month. Mine. Mr. Davis sought therapy for paranoia and aggression, he said, smirking. He's unfit. My jaw dropped. I'd seen a counselor twice, years ago, after a rough patch at work. Lucy had dug it up, twisted it, weaponized it. Greg objected, but the damage was done. The judge's pen scratched furiously, her face unreadable. Ruling came quick. Temporary joint custody, pending a full trial. Lucy got the boys half the week, me the other. No relocation until final orders, the judge added, eyeing Lucy. A small win, but it felt like a gut punch. She'd lied, cheated, schemed, and still walked out with my kids in her clutch. Outside, she brushed past me, her smirk cold. See you in court, John. I drove home alone, the boys with her for the weekend. The house echoed, empty, gutted. I sank onto the couch, Steve's dinosaur book on the cushion beside me, and let the rage spill. She'd turned my life into a battlefield, and I was losing ground. But I wasn't done, not even close. The first week of joint custody carved me hollow. Dropping Mark and Steve at Lucy's friend's place, a swanky condo downtown, felt like handing them over to a stranger. Mark clung to my leg, whining, "Why can't we stay with you?" Steve just stared at his shoes, silent, his dinosaur book tucked under his arm. I knelt, hugged them tight, and whispered, "I'll see you soon, okay? Love you." Lucy watched from the doorway, arms crossed, her face a mask of indifference. No Caleb in sight, smart, keeping him hidden. I drove off, their little faces burned into my rear view, and swore I'd get them back. Greg pushed hard. "We need more," he said over coffee, his tie loosened, voice grim. "The affair's messy, but courts don't care unless it's neglect or danger. Dig deeper." I nodded, my hands restless. I'd already tapped her phones, hacked her emails. What else was there? Then it hit me, her office. If Trevor was in on this, there'd be a trail. I called in a favor with an old IT buddy, Mike, who freelance security gigs. Get me in her firm's server, I said. Off the books. He hesitated, then agreed. You owe me, man. Friday night, while the boys were with her, I met Mike in a parking lot. He handed me a USB drive, his eyes darting. Root access encrypted. Her marketing team's files, emails, chats, contracts. Don't get caught. I didn't sleep that night, hunched over my laptop, tearing through her digital life. Most of it was mundane, campaign pitches, client notes. Then I found the folder, relocation. Inside, a memo from Trevor to Lucy, dated 3 months ago. Caleb's firm covers moving costs. Sign the NDAs, and the promotion's yours. My heart stopped. Caleb's firm. Not just a lover, a business partner. She'd hooked up with a corporate player, trading our family for a paycheck and a new zip code. The twist came buried in a chat log. Lucy to Trevor, last week. If John fights, Caleb says we can push the accident angle. Insurance payouts enough to bury him. Accident angle? I scrolled back, frantic. Another message, older. Caleb's guy can stage it. Car trouble, late night. John's out, kids are ours. My breath caught, sharp and ragged. They weren't just leaving, they'd planned to kill me. Fake an accident. Cash out my life insurance, take the boys. The room spun. I gripped the desk while burning my throat. She wasn't just a cheater. She was a monster. I copied everything. Sent it to Greg with a single line. She's dangerous. Move fast. He called within minutes. This changes the game, John. Attempted conspiracy. Maybe murder for hire. We'll file an emergency motion. Get a restraining order. Keep the boys with you. I agreed, but the fear gnawed deeper. What if she'd already set it in motion? Every car horn outside, every shadow felt like a threat. Sunday, I picked up Mark and Steve. Lucy met me at the curb, her smile tight, eyes cold. They missed you, she said, handing over their bags. I nodded, silent, my skin crawling. The boys climbed into my car, chattering about a movie she'd let them watch. I drove off, checking my mirrors, half expecting a tale. That night, I locked every door, set up my old security cams, and sat in the dark, watching them sleep. Mark's little snores, Steve's arm flung over his pillow. They were safe for now. But Lucy's shadow loomed. Her plan a ticking clock I couldn't stop. Greg's motion hit Monday. Emergency hearing set for Wednesday. I held my breath, clutching the evidence that could save us, or bury me if I'd misjudge her next move. She'd underestimated me once. She wouldn't again. The courthouse smelled of stale coffee and broken promises. Wednesday morning, I sat rigid in a wooden pew, Greg beside me, his briefcase stuffed with every shred of dirt I'd dug up. The boys were with my sister, safe for now, but their absence ached like a phantom limb. Lucy sat across the aisle, composed, her navy blazer crisp, hair pinned back like she was auditioning for sainthood. Her lawyer whispered in her ear, his smirk a blade twisting in my gut. The emergency hearing was my shot to stop her, to prove she was a threat. I'd barely slept, haunted by that chat log, accident angle, and the image of my car careening off a road. The judge entered, the same gray-streaked woman from before, her face etched with fatigue. We're here on Mr. Davis's motion for sole custody and a restraining order, she said, peering over her glasses. Greg stood, voice steady. Your Honor, we have evidence of a conspiracy, adultery, planned relocation, and a potential plot to harm my client for financial gain. He laid it out. The PI's photos, the lease, the bank records, Trevor's memo, the chilling chat about an accident. The courtroom hushed, the air thick with my dread. Lucy's lawyer shot up, all polished indignation. Baseless allegations, Your Honor. Hack files illegally obtained. My client's affair doesn't make her a criminal. He slid a stack of papers forward. Conversely, Mr. Davis's obsession, spying, paranoia, shows he's the unstable one. We request a psych evaluation. My fists clenched. He was flipping it again, using my own moves against me. The judge frowned, flipping through the evidence. This accident claim, where's the proof of intent? Greg pointed to the chat log. It's circumstantial, yes, but paired with the insurance policy, $1 million, updated last year, it's a pattern. Her brow furrowed deeper. Lucy shifted, her mask slipping for a split second, and I saw it, fear. She knew I'd crack her open. Then the twist landed. Her lawyer stood again, voice smug. Your Honor, Mrs. Davis has a witness. A man strode in, mid-30s, wiry, nervous. This is Daniel Price, a mechanic. He'll testify Mr. Davis asked him to tamper with his own brakes 2 weeks ago, claiming it was for insurance purposes. My jaw dropped. That's a lie. I hissed, but Greg gripped my arm, silencing me. Daniel took the stand, avoiding my glare. Yeah, he paid me $500. Said he needed an accident to look real. The room spun. Lucy's eyes met mine, cold, triumphant. She'd framed me, turned my desperation into her weapon. Greg objected, furious. No record of this payment exists. It's fabricated. But the judge raised a hand. Enough. I'll review all testimony and evidence. Ruling by end of day. Hours dragged. A purgatory of pacing and dread. At 4 p.m., we reconvened. The judge's voice was flat. Joint custody stands. No relocation permitted yet. Mrs. Davis, no contact with Kayla Morrison pending investigation. Mr. Davis, submit to a psych evaluation within 30 days. Next hearing in 2 months. She banged the gavel, and it was over. Lucy smirked as she left, her lawyer trailing. Greg cursed under his breath. They bought time, John. That mechanic, he's a plant. We'll find a money trail. I nodded numb. Joint custody kept the boys with me half the time, but her lie had muddied everything. I'd exposed her, but she clawed back, twisting the knife deeper. That night, I hugged Mark and Steve, their warmth my only anchor. Why's Mom mad? Mark asked. I forced a smile. Grown-up stuff, buddy. Inside, I burned, half victorious, half broken, trapped in her web with no clear way out. 2 months crawled by, a blur of sleepless nights and 4 smiles for the boys. Joint custody held, a fragile truce, but Lucy's shadow loomed over every pickup, every drop-off. Mark started asking, when's Mom coming home for good? Steve stopped talking about dinosaurs, his little face hardening beyond his 8 years. I'd failed to shield them, and that cut deeper than her lies. But I wasn't done. She'd framed me with that mechanic, dangled my kids like bait. Her reckoning was overdue. Greg found the crack. Daniel Price, he said over the phone, voice electric. Lucy paid him $2,000 from a hidden account, not cash like she claimed. Bank records tied to her. Perjury, bribery, slam dunk. I exhaled, the weight shifting. My psych eval came back clean. No paranoia, just a man pushed to the edge. The PI tracked Caleb too, caught him meeting Lucy despite the judge's order, photos time-stamped and notarized. I had her cornered. The final hearing hit like a storm. Greg laid out the mechanic's payout, Caleb's violation, her web of deceit. Lucy's lawyer floundered, his polish cracking as the judge's eyes narrowed. She took the stand, all crocodile tears. I was scared, Your Honor. John's relentless. But the evidence crushed her act. Bank statements, texts, witness statements from Mike about her server hacks. The judge's voice cut through. Mrs. Davis, your credibility is shot. Sole custody to Mr. Davis. Supervised visits for you. Pending criminal review. Case closed. She didn't scream, didn't fight, just stared at me, her eyes venomous as bailiffs escorted her out. Caleb vanished, his lease canceled, Trevor fired after an internal probe. My lawyer clapped my shoulder. You did it, John. I nodded, but the triumph tasted like ash. I'd won the boys, shredded her plans, but at what cost? That night, I sat in the living room, Mark and Steve asleep upstairs. The house was quiet, too quiet, without her heels clicking, her voice filling the gaps. I'd exposed her, stripped her bare, but the victory felt hollow. The boys asked about her less, their confusion hardening into distance. I'd saved them from her claws, but I couldn't erase the fracture she'd left. Why'd she stop loving us? Steve had whispered last week, his voice breaking me. I had no answer. Then the final twist came. A letter slipped under my door days later. Her handwriting jagged. You think you've won, but I'll always be their mother. They'll hate you for this one day. My chest tightened. Was she right? Had I burned their innocence to ashes just to torture? I crumpled it, tossed it in the trash, but her words lingered, a poison I couldn't purge. I stepped outside, the night air cold, rain tapping the roof. The rational man I'd been, the IT guy who fixed problems, was gone, replaced by someone harder, emptier. I'd avenged us, dismantled her life like she'd tried to dismantle mine. Caleb was out, her career trashed, her freedom on a leash. Revenge was mine, but satisfaction? That was a ghost slipping through my fingers. I looked up at the boys' window, their shadows safe behind the glass. They were mine now, fully, but the cost was a wound that wouldn't heal. Lucy's betrayal had gutted me, and my retaliation had gutted them. I'd fought for justice for them, but all I felt was the weight of what we'd lost, a family fractured beyond repair. The rain soaked me through, and I stood there, wondering if the emptiness was my real punishment, or hers, or ours.